Some 3, 4 objects are left, so we'll complete maybe in today or next class. We'll be talking about the namespace today. Namespace basically logically separates the objects from one another based on the need and purpose. Logically separates the objects from one another based on needs and purpose. Suppose there is a front end team who is working, like they are building front end, running front end containers, or there's a back end team, there's a DB team. Okay. So suppose you want that front end team should have access to their own code or data or uh, containers, pods, and backend team they have access to their own. So suppose you want to define a boundary between them so that you can specifically allocate the access to those particular teams. So you can create namespaces like front-end team, back-end team, like this. You can create namespaces and you can allocate roles accordingly. Okay, this is one of the examples. You can create a namespace. So logically separates the objects from one another based on the purpose. If not chosen, it is set to default. So if you do not choose any namespace, it will be a default namespace. Command will be like kubectl get ns, that is namespace. Again, there are two ways you can create: imperative way and declarative way. So imperative way, that means by commands to create namespace. Kubectl create namespace. You can write ns or you can write namespace. Suppose the namespace is dev-ns. Declarative way, to create namespace. Suppose you are creating a file ns.yaml, namespace.yaml. Let's open. Let's create first using commands. kubectl create namespace. Dev hyphen ns. Namespace created. If you do kubectl get ns, you can see apart from the one which we created, that is this one, dev.ns, how many namespaces by default are there? So there is a default one. Why, by default, if you do not create or provide namespace, it will take acquire the default one. So whatever we will be deploying will go to the default one. Then there is a kube node lease. Then there is a kube public. Then there is a kube system. Okay, these are namespaces. Now these are all like already set up when the cluster has been set up, or when the cluster is being set up, already these four namespaces by default is created. Which one? Default, kube node lease, kube public, and kube system. And this might be for killer coda environment, local path storage. Okay. But these four, apart from dev-ns, these four are by default created when you create a cluster, leaving dev-ns. That is the custom one, custom namespace. So now, if you want to create it using YAML, so vi suppose ns.yaml, press I for insert, API version v1, kind, namespace we are creating. So namespace, metadata. So in metadata, will give a name to the namespace. And let's the name given be test-ns. Now you can escape, colon w to exit, and you can apply the kubectl create kubectl create hyphen n hyphen f ns.yaml, namespace created. If you run again kubectl get ns, now you can see dev-ns. Apart from that, test-ns we just created using declaratively. Adding objects to the namespace. Let me copy this. Now, how to add Adding objects to the namespace, or you can say how to add object to the namespace. Adding the objects to the namespace. So doing it imperative way. So suppose kubectl run pod one hyphen hyphen image equals nginx latest hyphen hyphen namespace dev hyphen ns. And you can, instead of hyphen hyphen n space, you can write hyphen n as well. Or hyphen n dev hyphen ns. And then for checking, list the pods in namespace to list the pods in a particular namespace. kubectl get pods hyphen n dev hyphen ns. Like this. So kubectl run pod one hyphen hyphen image equals nginx latest hyphen n dev hyphen ns. So this time the pod will be created in dev ns. So if you do kubectl get pods hyphen n dev hyphen ns. So only display pod one. If you do similar with default, no resources found in the default namespace. So today we didn't create any pod in the default namespace. Or if you run the same command, do not mention. This time you can write pod 2, suppose. Pod created. Now run the command. See, in the default namespace. So didn't mention the namespace, it will be created in the default namespace. Sorry. Hmm. For all namespace, if you want to see, hyphen n space hyphen hyphen. No. It will be hyphen namespace hyphen. No. I think space. No. I forget for this command for all namespaces. kubectl get pods. Hmm. To list pods in all namespaces. To list pods in all namespaces instead of how like command. Huh. kubectl get pods hyphen hyphen all hyphen namespaces. So hyphen hyphen all hyphen namespaces. Let's see. Yes. Hmm. So it will display all the pods which are running in the cube system, in default, in div, wherever. It will display all. In declarative way. So how to add the object in declarative way? So suppose vi dev deploy hyphen dev hyphen ns dot yaml. Deploy hyphen dev hyphen ns dot yaml. Press an I for insert API version v. Now this will be apps v1. Kind is deployment. Metadata name nginx deployment. So this we are giving name in metadata for what? For replica set. Okay. Now, in which namespace we need to create it? So mention namespace where the replica will be created. Namespace dev hyphen ns. So pods will be deployed in dev hyphen ns instead of default namespace. Now you can go ahead and specifications spec. So in the spec replicas, suppose three selector. Selector. Now after selector, match labels. App nginx template, template, then again metadata. Now this time for pod. So name, Nginx pod, suppose, and then labels, app, which app, Nginx, and then specifications for the containers, containers hyphen name, Nginx hyphen container, and image. So image be let docker.io slash library slash nginx latest escape :wq exit kubectl create kubectl create hyphen f deploy. We don't have to mention the hyphen n dev hyphen ns since we mentioned inside the YAML itself. So do not have to mention it. Okay, resource mapping already given. Mm, create namespace. Mm, just a minute. Huh? Give me 1 minute. Okay, sorry. Let's start. So, kubectl create what it is saying, resource mapping not found, name nginx hyphen deployment namespace. Okay, okay. Vi deploy apps. Press and I apps escape colon WQ1. Now it will deploy. Deployment created. So kubectl get rs hyphen n, in which namespace dev hyphen ns. So inside this namespace we have replica set nginx deployment. If you see get deployment in dev namespace nginx deployment, and kubectl get pods. Then these are the four pods. One we created with imperative way, another three with declarative way. This one. So this is namespace. You can manage the namespace. If you do hyphen o wide as well, hyphen o wide, you can get more information. Nodes, IPs, all those things. If you want to change the current default namespace, then you can also change it. Let me copy this. VI. Okay. This is the declarative bit. Addition of the pods to the namespace. Now, here, to check. So to check, you can run commands like kubectl get deployment hyphen n dev hyphen ns hyphen o wide, like this. You can check the deployment. Similarly, you can check the replica set and pods. So instead of deployment, you can have replica set rs. And for pods, you can also check like pods. If you want to check all, then all. Get all. Change the current namespace to change the current namespace from default. So already there is a default namespace set. To set it from default, you can run kubectl config set hyphen context hyphen current hyphen namespace or hyphen n also. Okay. Space dev hyphen ns like this. So it will set the current context from default namespace to the dev hyphen ns namespace. For vice versa, you can revert it as well. Okay. To revert. So for reverting, kubectl config set context hyphen currents. So now you have set the current as dev hyphen ns. Now you can bring it to default like this. Kubectl config set context kubectl config set hyphen context current current hyphen current hyphen namespace dev hyphen ns. Context Kubernetes modified. So context file, like configuration file is modified now. And that configuration file, the default namespace will be. Now if I create kubectl create pod 3, suppose I'm creating now, hyphen image equals nginx latest. Suppose this command I'm creating the pod. Instead of create, it will be run here. Run. So kubectl run pod and then mentioning the image. Now if I don't mention namespace, since I have changed the context from default to dev namespace, so it will be created, pod 3 will be created in the dev namespace. Pod created. Now kubectl get pods. So it will by default display the pod 3 here. Okay. And why it is displaying pod 1 as well? Because I have created pod 1 in dev name hyphen namespace. But since I have changed the config from default to dev hyphen namespace, now it will by default only display the pods which are there in dev hyphen namespace. Now if I revert the context, current is now dev hyphen namespace. Now I set it default. Again modified. Now if I perform get pods, see, only pod 2 is displayed now because now it is displaying only the pod which is in the default namespace. Got it, everyone? So this is namespace. Okay. Now daemon set. So let's go and check daemon set now. What is daemon set? Daemon set object. So it is similar to first thing is similar to replica set. Similar to replica set. Second thing, replica set creates multiple pods which may be placed on different nodes in cluster. What about daemon set? Daemon set creates pods equal to the number of nodes. Equal to the number of nodes. So if there are 3 nodes in the cluster, 4 nodes in the cluster, so one pod in each node will be created. So create pods equal to the number of nodes. In the cluster. No need to provide replicas in the daemon set. No need to provide replicas in the daemon set. As one pod is placed by default in every node. What is the example? Use case. Use case of daemon set. Used for monitoring the nodes. Used for monitoring the nodes. Collecting logs from the nodes. From the nodes. So now suppose I want to install any monitoring tool. So how I will monitor my nodes? So whenever I will deploy each pod in each node, then only I can monitor all the nodes, right? Whether my node is high on CPU or whatever is in my node happening. So I need to collect the logs, basically the metrics. How I can collect? I can take any application monitoring tool and I can apply that or run that as a pod Using what object? Using daemon set object. Now, if I use replica set object, maybe it is not installed in any one of the nodes. But strictly, if I use daemon set objects for deploying any of the monitoring tool like Prometheus, what will happen? It will by default, one pod will be deployed in each node. And what Prometheus will do? It will extract the metrics out of that node. So in this way, I can extract metrics from all the nodes. So use cases, monitoring. Okay. Monitoring is the purpose. So if I go ahead and use daemon set now. So vi ds dot YAML, that is daemon set. Press an I, API version, apps slash v1 kind daemon set this time. Daemon set. Metadata. So we'll name the daemon set here in the metadata. What is the name of the daemon set? You can give any. Suppose my app hyphen ds, my app daemon set. Spec, we can provide spec as well. So in the spec, selector, selector support. Remember, selector support is very important. Okay. So if you do not select it, it will not match the label. So match labels for what app you want to match. Suppose app is my app hyphen agent. Now template. So in the template again there will be metadata. Again there will be name. This time this will be the name of the pod. So we are running my app agent. For inside that agent we are running my app suppose pod, in which you are running that monitoring agent. Okay. And then comes the labels. So you can match the labels. So what was the label there? App. What app? My app agent. Okay. My app agent. And what the agent will do? Suppose log collect. And now the comes the container specifications. Spec. So now containers, containers hyphen name, my app. Let's give the name is log hyphen container. And what image? Okay, let's give the image. So docker.io slash library slash nginx. Exit. Kubectl apply -f daemon set dot yaml. So daemon set created. Now if you do kubectl get pods perform like -o wide. So now we have two node Kubernetes cluster running. One is control plane, one is node one. So you can see on each node, one daemon set is running. Here we cannot give replicas. Here we cannot give replicas. Okay. Like unlike the deployment we performed. Okay. Unlike the deployment we performed. So like if you give pods hyphen name dev hyphen namespace, we created the deployment. Okay. Uh, hyphen o wide. Now you can see here it is not evenly distributed. Means you can see in the deployment which we did earlier. So two pods are in node one and the third one is in control plane. Now that is the ready pod. So if anything happens to these two pods, then the third one which is in the control plane will become the new pod in the node one. And again a new pod will be ready in the control plane. So like that three pods. But if you see by default, all the pods are created where? In the node one itself. You can see Nginx deployment, Nginx deployment. Third, leave the third one. That is the ready one. That will be the with the control plane only. Okay. But the two apart in those three, two are where? In node one only. But if you see daemon set, we created two. Okay. So each means node one also and control plane also. Both are having one. So you can here no need to provide the replicas in the daemon set because purpose of daemon set is different. Okay. So kubectl get daemon set. Okay. See, node selector is none. It will not select any node. It will by default apply to each and every node. So node selector is none here. Cat ds. Let me copy this. Copy. Delete vi. So this is daemon set. Apply. Mm. Yeah. So this is demons. Next class, we are left with config maps and config secret, and then we'll discuss some other concepts like scaling in Kubernetes, like hyperpod autoscaler, so horizontal pod autoscaler, vertical pod autoscaler, okay, and some kind of deployments. I think one or two class will complete this, okay, and then we'll see installation, and then we'll go to Terraform.